In Linux, you'll typically find different directories than you would in Windows. Like in Windows, you've got your C Windows directory, you've got your C users directory. Those directories just don't exist on Linux. My system's powering off. Pause real quick. All right, so my 4-hour lab session expired and my virtual machine shut down. That's totally fine. All I did was start my lab back up and reconnect, so no big deal. Sometimes I like to show how things don't always go the way that I expect or want them to go, and just show that everything's going to be okay. So here we are. I'm back in my system. I'm going to clear the screen, and let's take a look at the directories that exist on this system. So there, if I do cd space / that will take me to the root of my file system. And if I run ls, we can see there's a bunch of good stuff here. So Linux organizes software differently. Let's take a look at some of these folders. I've got my home directory. That's where typically your users are going to store their personal files. This is like your documents folder on a Windows system. Inside your specific user accounts folder. So everyone's going to have their home folder where they store their stuff. Etc is where we're going to store configuration files. Like if you're setting up a web server, you're going to configure the web server in that configuration file. The var folder is for files that are going to grow and change. Like logs are typically stored in the var file, like variable length files. So you might be constantly adding stuff to that var folder. The word root here can be, well, we use the word root several different ways. The root user is the administrative user. So if you have root permissions, you can do whatever you want. The root user has a very special home directory. The root users, if I go to /home and I run ls, there's no root user folder in the home directory. Instead, this /root folder is just for that root account. Common convention in the Linux world. It's just something to be aware of. Notice I got permission denied because I'm currently logged in with the Ubuntu user account, not the root account, so I do not have access to the root user's home directory. The dev folder, it's not for development, it's for devices. So if I go to cd/dev and I list, there's a bunch of stuff here. These are hardware devices that would be like attached to your computer. Things like your hard drive or network cards. All those, like I've got a CPU here. I've got my disk, all that kind of stuff. In the Linux world, hardware is just treated like files. So if some data is being sent to your monitor, like that data can just be sent to a file and the operating system takes that information and processes it and can show it on your screen. Media, if I cd media and I list, I've got nothing here. This is not for movies, pictures, MP3 files, all that kind of media. Instead, this is media like removable media, like a CD-ROM or a USB drive that you connect to your computer. Something that can be added and removed. So it's kind of like a hardware device, but it's just got files and contents that you'll add and remove periodically. That's why it's not stored in the dev directory. So let's just explore, take a look around, poke around, and if there's a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense right now, that's fine. Don't stress about it. We're just exploring. If I run ls/home, that's going to list the files using the absolute path of /home. So even though I'm currently in the media folder, if I include that / before home, it'll show me the contents of a directory that's not my current working directory. Like if I run pwd, I'm currently in /media. But if I run ls/home, it's going to show me the contents of my home directory specifically. If I cd tilde, if I run ls, I've got no directories in my current home directory. If you were using a desktop operating system, like Ubuntu Desktop or Kali Linux, using the graphical user interface, typically they would have a desktop directory, a documents directory, a downloads directory. They would create those things by default just to make your life easier. Because we're using a server operating system, they really try to be very minimal with the amount of directories they create, because you're typically not going to have users storing their own personal documents in a home directory on a server, but something to be aware of. We can list the files in /etc, whole bunch of them. You want to configure your network? You could do that here. You want to configure the dynamic host configuration protocol to give IP addresses? You could do that here. You want to schedule stuff to run periodically? You could do that here. Tons of stuff that you can configure. Generally speaking, if you don't know what it's doing, you don't want to mess around with it. But you can take a look at these files here. If we go to /var, I'll cd var and just ls that stuff. What exists here? Well, we got logs, we have mail. Like if we were running a mail server, email is going to be coming in periodically. That could be stored there. We don't have, do we have? So oftentimes, if you're setting up a web server, there will be a www directory inside the /var directory. So do we have one? I'm going to run ls. It's listed alphabetically, so I can jump to the end. I don't see a www directory, so that seems to indicate that this server right now is not configured to be a web server. So if I run ls/var www, it's going to tell me, yeah, I can't access it because it's not there, and that's fine. I already tried root, but let's do it again. ls root, cannot access it. We'll access it in another exercise, but that's fine. We already took a look at device and media. But that's just a few places on Linux where important files are kept. The astute observer will notice that I didn't show absolutely everything. We've got a bin folder. Those are binary files, programs that your computer has installed. Like there's the Who Am I program there, stored right there. Lots of programs are stored in this bin folder. I'm going to hit enter just to get me back to my prompt down there. I've got bin, I've also got sbin. So sbin, these are more administrative programs. So we've got programs in multiple places, just kind of organized by permissions. So user add and user del, for example, these are in sbin. These are tools to add new accounts to the computer. We only want administrators doing that kind of stuff. We'll let anybody list files and folders as long as they've got the right permissions on those files and folders inside our Linux system. But we don't just want anybody adding and removing user accounts. Tons and tons of different things in here. And again, you might not be using these, but your operating system might be using these in the background. So when we install software, lots of times those programs will get put here. Just jumping ahead real quick. I ran a command, where is cowsay? So we installed the cowsay application. So I said, where is, all one word, where is cowsay? And it told me it put that in user games cowsay. So if I cd/usr, these are user applications that I would have installed. They're not part of the operating system necessarily. It's stuff I want. CD games. Here's some stuff I can play. There's my Cowsay game. Font, it's a different color because it's an executable. It's a program that I can play around with. All right, so it's just organized differently than Windows. It's not better or worse. It's just the Linux way. Hopefully, when we look at the root, we can start to make a little bit more sense of how files are organized here in Linux. Different Linux distributions might organize the files differently. They might put them in different places. That's why it's important just to be able to explore, list files, list directories. We'll introduce some search tools later. If we can't find something, we can use some different tools to find those files. Like I just showed where is, because I know I've got Cowsay. If I say where is Cowsay, it'll tell me where it found it. But yeah, it's just different than Windows, so it's good to have some experience finding the important files on our computer.